have you traveling south, you'll need a heavier jacket than you need up here in New York. My wife last night when I was on the plane, she said, "Did you take your big jacket?" I said, "According to the weather, I don't need it." So it's actually colder in the south, in Atlanta, Georgia, this morning than it is here. But it's good to be with you. I'm grateful that they gave me one more chance. I came last year. It's the way I always feel. I was friends with a lot of older pastors, and I used to be one of the younger pastors. Now I'm one of the older pastors, but I often heard them say that it'll mean a lot to you in the days ahead when you see that you've been to places over and over again. And so it's really been neat to have a relationship. Gosh, I have to check, but I know it goes back 15 or 20 years with this seminary as well as the main campus over in Memphis. And so I really am delighted to be here. I love to spend time with leaders. And in particular, I really do love to spend time with pastors. For 24 years, I've led a ministry that God gave me called Timothy Barnabas. Timothy for instruction, Barnabas for encouragement. And I'm of the deep conviction that normally when pastors and their staff come to our conferences, they're probably as much in need to be encouraged in what they already know as they are to be encouraged in something new. So there's a great need there. So I even wrote a major lesson I addressed our denomination with a few years ago, and it was entitled Encouragement That Fuels Enthusiasm. And so Paul did that in Timothy's life, and so it's really neat to do it. Plus, so many have invested in me. What you can do, I really study leaders a lot, and we'll talk about what that looks like in our life. But I've just noticed through the years that you can pour into someone, and if they take what you give them and pour into someone else, it's amazing what God does in their life. However, I've also observed those you pour into, and all they do is spend time telling others how good you've been to them without ever pouring into anyone else. Bet some of you maybe have, through the years, have traveled to the land of Israel. And I always like it when we get to the Dead Sea and just remind them that the Dead Sea is the lowest point on the face of the earth. So you can say it's really deep here, but it's dead. And so a lot of deep, it's like somebody leaves a worship service, and man, that was awesome. And an honest layman says, I didn't understand a word of it. But the other is bragging because he didn't understand it either. And that must be what made it so awesome, is that it was deeper than he had ever heard. And not only is it dead, but one of the major reasons the Dead Sea is dead is it has no outlet source. It flows nowhere. It ends there. And so when a person is a taker, a consumer in life, they never influence and affect other people's lives. So in my early days, people poured into me. There's an old statement that if you ever see a turtle on a fence post, know that someone put it there. And so bottom line is no one gets where they get in life without somebody investing and pouring and encouraging in their life. So grateful for that. And here's what I know. Since I believe I am the product of so many people's investments, I've realized the need to invest in others. And the reason I like to invest in leaders is if I can help a leader, it's exponential investment in that they invest in so many others. I could take you back to being 23. I got converted at 20. I managed a pool room for 4 years. Was from a broken home since I was 7 years old, raised in a project in poverty. And then when I became 20 and was converted, really began to sense God wanted to do something in my life. And so within a year, I'd surrendered to ministry, didn't know what that would look like. And within 3 years of my conversion, I was pastoring my first church. I look back on that and I think, is that really true? That is scary. So for the last 41 years with no break, I've been someone's pastor. So it's been a remarkable journey. Someone says, would you recommend someone as new as you becoming a pastor? If God calls you, it'd be a great idea. But someone says, how do you explain you were out there so fast? He pushed me in the deep end. Evidently, he just thought the only way Hunt's going to learn is to get in there and submerge himself, not emerge, submerge himself into this culture. And it was in those days that laymen began to invest in me, began to really believe in me. And by the way, you can't lead people you don't believe in. And tell you something else, you can't lead people you don't love. So a lot of jokes about pastors and their people, but really if you find yourself very critical of the people that you lead, you will never lead them. So you've got to love them to lead them. So what I did, I wrote on leadership, and let me tell you how cool this is. Yesterday, I hosted about 65 pastors and staff members at Woodstock on our campus. And it was a day with John Edmund Haggai. You may know the name, maybe you don't, but he's 93 years old. He's had his office for about the last 40 years in Day Foundation's building there in Atlanta. So with Days Inn. And he's traveled around the world 105 times, and he's written 20 influential books on leadership. He is the person that John Maxwell, #1 leadership guru in the world, says inspired him to write and teach leadership. So a significant individual, just brilliant. And you don't expect you to know him because most of his work's been outside this nation. He's trained 106,000 leaders. His leadership training facility is a resort in Maui. I mean, just say that to say this dude's been pretty influential. He's Southern Baptist, by the way. But at 93 years old, I've been meeting with him for years on a consistent basis because he's so much older than I am. To say, John, when you were this age, that age, and it's kind of cute. One day someone asked me, said, that's a very influential leader. They knew who he was. They said, how in the heaven did you network with a man like that? I said, it's really easy. All his friends are dead. So it's 93 years old. So anyway, we engaged with him, but John helped me with this lesson. I mean, I just thought he's written great books. He gave everyone there yesterday a copy of a book he wrote about 8 years ago called The Influential Person. And it was just, so you read. Now, I want to every now and then just to give you some statements. I get up early in the morning, and someone says if you get up early, you're always bragging about it. Well, let me say this. When somebody says they're a morning person, I would probably say, no, you're an intentional morning person. Because I got to be an early riser by discipline. And really not just by discipline, but by need. And everybody has to know when their best time is. Like my wife is a night owl. She can say, I'm going to take my make off and go to bed. I'm so sleepy. And then I wake up 4 hours later and she's on her computer. She got a second wind. I never get an evening second wind. Never. All right. But in the morning, I get up early in the morning and it's really my best time. So I think whatever your best time is what you ought to give the Lord. And so I get up in the morning and I didn't like the journals that I was picking up and using through the years. So I did one with Thomas Nelson. And I don't know if I gave you one last time I was here or not, but I brought you some gifts today. But anyway, I journal. And what I do after reading and praying and scripture and devotionals, if I have a thought, I write them out. Sometimes they're short, sometimes I can't quit writing. But I wrote a statement recently, and just see if it resonates with you. I wrote, I've come to believe that seemingly most of the things that I'm good at, I got there by discipline, not by love. But once it became a consistent discipline, I loved it. So, all right, explain that. All right, coming out of the background, I did. I was a high school dropout. Took me 3 times to finish to pass the GED. So quite a scholar here. And I think it's kind of cool. You have that type background and you teach at seminaries. Help me to understand that. I did Robbie Zachariah's 25th anniversary. They invited me because I'm so intelligent. But really, it's sort of just a joke that God made good out of. But anyway, I read a lot. I always have a book I'm reading. Why? Because if you're going to keep leading, you got to keep learning. And so I'm always reading. I just finished Jerry Bridges' book on the blessing of humility. He wrote for 50 years his book, The Pursuit of Holiness. I think it's at 10 million volumes. You see a book in Christian community that sold 10 million, you ought to find out why. But Blessing of Humility is incredible. What he did is it was the last book he wrote. He was 86 when he passed last spring. And he wrote for the Navigators, and I've got so much in my mind I could talk to you about Navigators and why I like them, why I researched the Navigators. But anyway, in the book, he just took the Beatitudes and he said, none of the Beatitudes, each principle demands humility. And I just thought it was great. It's the last book he wrote, then he went to heaven. And now David Jeremiah's latest book, he's 76 years old. God's greatly used Dr. Jeremiah, but he's just written a book and he's done it on the fruit of the Spirit. And he says that love is the major theme of each of the fruit of the Spirit being a reality in your life. And then both of them, from different angles, said that of the attributes of the Holy Spirit, the two that are mentioned the most in the Bible are love and humility. I thought that was interesting. So I'm just always learning, reading, and I read for personal edification and for personal holiness in my own life, which I need. So we do it. So I've just found that those are the things. I exercise. Ran for years, and older I get, I'm finding that most people have blown out something. I've been fortunate not to be injured, so I speed walk now. But I do that. It's not just say, oh, I can't hardly wait to get up, but it's a discipline, so you need to do it because I want to keep trucking on. So anyway, I love to teach leaders. So what I want to talk about this morning, I thought it was interesting when the good doc picked me up last night and said, so what are you teaching on? I said, I'm going to teach on leadership. So I actually wrote a lesson on leadership. Now, good news. We have a link that we will send every single one of you with everything I have written. All right, so you'll get that. Bad news is you don't have it right now. Okay, so it's going to be listen. Maybe you're one of those. You're a good listener, and then maybe I'll say something that's worth taking a note on. But I'm going to define leadership, and I want you to hang with me because I'm going to take time to get there, and then I'm going to show you biblical leaders and how the principles I shared were the realities in their life. And hey, let me tell you how I've processed things in my life. I said 30 years ago, I would like to take as many people to heaven with me as I can. So I'm a personal witness for Jesus. We train our church in what's called Great Commission Initiative. We offer it, and people come from everywhere, and we offer it to them free, and we even feed them breakfast and lunch while they're there. We picked up what's going on with International Mission Board around the world. Seems to be so effective that now it's become one of the greatest tools being used in America. And it's called T for T, or others call it Four Fields. But it's caring through prayer, and then after caring through prayer, engaging with someone and giving a gospel story, and then wrapping your story around the gospel. And that's really needed. It's not our story that's powerful, it's his story that's powerful. So we share it. So we're really desiring to be evangelists. And then secondly, I want to help develop as many fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ as I can. And so being in a church for 31 years, you're able to see what God has produced and give credit where credit's due. But if you've got a certain style of ministry and preaching, and I'm an expositional preacher, verse by verse, preach through books, do series, thematic, but always expositional. And so really after all your years, you are able to look into the face and into the lives of the people and see, what has been developed, and to God be the glory. But we were in a church that had never sent a missionary, and it was 150 years old. So I took an older church. I'm not the founding pastor. And then we have a church that had not planted a church. And so instead of going in and saying, you've not done this, we began to lead the church. Truett Cathy of Chick-fil-A said, the average person will never be a leader of others until they learn to lead themselves. Paul told Timothy, train yourself to be godly. Train yourself to be godly. So I have to take care of myself before you can share with others. So I want you to listen, and remember, you're going to get all this in an email link from us. We've already sent it to the school, so don't get frustrated with me. Leadership is the discipline of deliberately exerting special influence within a group to move it toward goals of beneficial permanence that fulfills the group's real needs. Now, I'm going to break all that down. You're thinking, good night. You're going to start this way? Yes. And you will feel better about it if you'll hang with me. But I've got a discipline in my life, and I am deliberately exerting. And by the way, you can't lead people that you don't influence. And so I need God to help me to take a group of people and to influence them. A young man took a church recently after he was there just a few months, and I'm not picking on him. He's a friend, and he comes from a church where it's pastored by a friend. He went to a church where they're my friends. But after 3 months, he left. And so there was a podcast done on YouTube by him recently. So I was going to listen to it anyway, but people that knew me said, listen to this and speak into it, and I just, told them personally what I thought, but I didn't, blog on it or anything. But basically, the young man said, gosh, I'd been somewhere 20 years, and, after being there 20 years, you kind of establish who you are. They kind of know you to be a person of integrity and a person of character. And he said, to have gone over there and take that church, the reason I felt I needed to leave is I'd already done all that. I'd have to do it all over again. And I'm thinking, duh. Good night. So it's like, what do you think? You just go in and say, read what I've done and follow me starting today. No, you do reestablish yourself. And so you go in and you need to, how am I going to lead these people? To make you feel better, some of you we've not met, the church I left a very strong, solid church in my 6th year in Wilmington, North Carolina. And I was divinely called by God. I believe that with all of my heart. My friend Jason Allen at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary just wrote a book on calling, and that was a dire need, that book. I wrote a little excerpt for it. It needed to be written so we can get back to the call of God, that there's a place. I'm telling you, God told Elijah where to go, and he said, and provision will be there. And I'm of a deep conviction, had he gone somewhere else, the provision would not have been there. And he'd have been thinking, God, why aren't you coming through? And he said, I did, but I dumped it over there where I told you to go. And then when he was through with him there, listen to this. The brook dried up. God dries up brooks. And when he does, you ought to be listening for the next assignment. When the brook dried up, he said, I want you to leave Cherith and go to Zarephath. And he said, when you get there, there'll be a provision there. So this is what's wrong with us preachers. You have so much going on in your heart, and you get up and you can't stay with the lesson. But and plus, if you got ADD, it makes it easy, I tell someone my brain feels like a transistor radio. I've got signals coming in from everywhere, and it just depends on which one's the loudest I will give to you. So you have special influence. So what are you doing? Really, as a spiritual leader, I have the Word of God, I have the Spirit of God, I have the Son of God, I have the call of God. And so what I'm doing is working with the people. A young man that I mentor, I've been mentoring 2 preachers a year for 21 years. You're a college graduate, you're a young man that feels God's called you to preach. You come spend a year with me. So I have 2 been doing it a long time. So I really, really believe in mentoring and modeling and trying to influence others. So one of them called me. His name's Wade Parker. He's got him a small church over in Jacksonville, Florida. He's Jacksonville, North Carolina, I'm sorry. And they're doing a good job. And he cast vision the other night. I do State of the Church address at Woodstock every year to cast vision of what I think God is doing and what we're believing him for that year. And we outline it, and then we put mics out in the congregation and say, any questions, comments. And the reason it's a good meeting is we don't vote. Voting puts tension in a room. It does, but you're not voting. You're just saying, hey, I want to just tell you what I sense God's up to. And What are you thinking? We cast vision. I could tell you more about that. We'll try to do a little question and answer times at different times today. And if we do, if something I said gets your attention, you want to talk more about it, we will. But he said this. He said, hey, there seemed to be overwhelming embracing of the vision I shared, but, best I can tell, some are not really for it. What would you recommend I do? And I told him what Mark Courts told me 35 years ago. Move with the movers. You lead a group in a church and you get a 90% vote to move forward with something, but a couple of your gatekeepers come up the next day and tell you they're not for it, and you find out they're pretty influential financially and in other ways, and so you renege on leading with the vote that you received. Now you just lost the 90%. I mean, it's leadership. Hardly ever does a pastor call me and say, I preached a sermon Sunday. They didn't like the doctrine I taught, and they're asking me to leave. Hardly ever do I hear that. But I'm telling you, normally it's relational, which fits within the context of leadership, and people are losing it. So you're exerting special influence within. Listen to this, though. This is so good. Within a group to move it toward goals. So what are they? John Haggai, yesterday in my interview with him, and then letting pastors and staff ask him questions, he's written a book that talks about why leaders won't set goals. Sometimes you're even afraid to acknowledge that, hey, we're just going to trust God, but here's kind of where we'd like to be next year. And not a football team in America that doesn't have goals. And what they'd like to do, and they go in and see why they didn't reach them, is they watch the game from the following, the day before. So we're going to move it toward this, and it's going to be beneficial permanence. This is going to be good for us. But listen to the statement that fulfills the group's real need. We started a church in New York a few years ago. And our music guys went in, and they really are gifted. But they did have their style of music they wanted. And they met in homes, and everything was fine. And they finally found them a place to meet. And each week they were losing people. And it was their music. And it's not the lyrics they were singing. It was the volume they played. And here's what the people said. The reason we quit coming, this is the noisiest city in America. That's what some of the New Yorkers said. And they said, last thing we want to do is come to church and hear more noise. And so they were wise. They backed down and went acoustical and began to build again. So why would you even bring that up? What I'm exerting influence to do is to fulfill the group's real need, not mine. Sometimes we say we're going to go engage the culture. No, you're not. You're over there trying to create your own. A locomotive goes faster and further, pulling nothing. Problem. It's not doing that for which it was designed. So what does a locomotive do? It backs up. That preacher backs up to where that church is he takes. Connects with them. And then he moves them. Slowly but surely. Put a 2x4 on a railroad track in front of it, it won't move. Move the 2x4 and let it get some momentum, it'll go through a brick wall. That was good. I like what I just said. That's good. That'll help you. But it is. So what I want to do is I want to connect. Somebody goes in and says, I'm gonna go in there, but I'm gonna do all this changing. My wife is a NASCAR fan. They did a story on her Atlanta Journal-Constitution a few years ago because she's so feminine, and that's before just everybody got into NASCAR. Or some of you are saying, "Oh, they did? I didn't," but just sort of using that phrase. So everybody knowing that Miss Janet loves NASCAR, it's amazing what we get in the mail. So I've got a guy that's a computer scientist with Lockheed, and it's changed. Just a few years ago, it's changed. But used to, when Dale Earnhardt wanted to check to make sure there was no resistance in his automobile as it pertains to resistance on the track, they would take it into a chamber where they check the jets. and in that blows air over the car, and the computers determine if there's any resistance to the wind, like creating barriers. And normally when they would take it in there, here's what they already had determined. It's not the tires. Listen to me carefully, because all the cars use the exact same tires. In case you didn't know it, they all run the exact same fuel. They all have the exact same engine power. They have restriction plates for certain tracks. So you forget about that. The only thing you're waiting to see is if there's somewhere around, normally the windows or the windshield or the back windows, somewhere in the design of the car that is resisting, and then they make small tweaks so that the car can run without those barriers. That's what we do in churches. And it's normally small tweaks at a time. Now, if the Baptist church was checking people, they would, if the thing's not going well, they think the driver needs to be replaced. But you don't need to replace Dale Earnhardt. He's the best. You just need to tweak the car some. But that's how we think in church life in America. You know, things hadn't been going that good since that new preacher came. We're gonna ask him to step down. Or I'll tell you, if we could stripe the parking lot, if we could get blacktop and stripe the parking lot, I believe people would come. That's like saying that if the Atlanta Braves would change the chili on the hot dogs, more people would come watch them play. I mean, really, what we're doing, we're looking in the wrong areas instead of, dealing with the elephant in the room to really try to make a difference. But it fulfills the group's real needs. So I've got to convince our people as I cast vision, and I'm going to give you 10 walking points through about vision. And I mean, it is as simple as I've ever taught in my life. But when I convince the people that what I'm challenging to do is for their good, there can be major buy-in. All right, so now let me break those words down. Discipline. Leaders are made, not born. That's always been the question. Now, I'm not through, but I want you to just hear that. Some who maybe intuitively have the characteristics of a leader, but true leadership is a discipline. You can watch. I've got grandchildren, children of course, and I've got a granddaughter, and every time I see her, everybody's just following her. All the little girls follow her, and we just say she's a Pied Piper. She kind of leads. She's not just a follower going along. What does everybody do when they call, my son got in with the wrong crowd? Have you ever thought that your son is the wrong crowd? I mean, who is the wrong crowd? He's always part of the wrong crowd. Who leads the wrong crowd? But anyway, I just because I think I used to. All right, so intuitively, some people are better leaders. Personally, I've always said, and you don't have to agree with me, when I think about the parable of the talents, I think I'm kind of a one-talent person. I have a gift of encouragement, and I wear it out. I do. Just wear it. I studied an animal. If you want to do a little study, somebody asked me to do it. Studied a hedgehog. I didn't know there was such a thing as a hedgehog. You know what they say about a hedgehog? He does the same thing over and over and over again. And that's what I believe you ought to do. If God gives you a gift, just keep using the gift. Quit trying to be somebody you're not. And by the way, it says a 65-year-old pastor. You don't believe people have tried to reshape me through the years? Pastor Johnny, people don't use the podium anymore. Sit on a stool, do this. And I don't mind if you sit on a stool. I use that sometime too. But can't you imagine Paul telling Timothy, when you come to Ephesus, son, wear your light blue shirt. It's a power shirt. And come on, give me a break. And the people would not respond in Derby because he used a pulpit. Come on, now I'm glad you're laughing. That's how ridiculous some of the stuff is that we're thinking. And so what we've done, we begin to say, that's the source of power to reach people. No, I think it's being who you are, authenticity, genuineness. Everybody wants somebody that's real. Be who you are. A lot of this is just overflow. I'm sorry. All right, deliberately indicates a commitment on the part of the leader to his calling as a leader. Deliberate. It's a spiritual commitment. It strengthens the place of your leadership. And for us, it's in the church, whatever we're doing in the church, whether I'm a Sunday school teacher or minister of education, music, preaching, or whatever. So in times of painful reverses, and we have them, I lead nationally for North American Mission Board leadership training and state level for revitalization and helping plateaued churches. And one of the reasons I like to do this, every church I've ever pastored needed revitalization. And I've stayed long enough at Woodstock, I've had to revitalize what was revitalized. I mean, really have. I mean, it's not just something you put in and it just stays there. And so strength and wisdom are found here. So in times of enormous achievement, there's gratitude and humility ought to be revealed. All right, so exerts special influence. What does that mean, Pastor? Well, it's not forced on others. You're not a power holder as a leader. You exert force on people. That's not the picture. People would follow you out of fear. I was with, an incredible businessman recently, and he wanted to know if we were going to cross each other at Atlanta Airport, and we found that out the night before, and he said, and I had a couple hours before my next flight, and he was coming in to go home, and he said, can we meet and let me buy you breakfast? And he was really frustrated about something in his company and how people were being treated in his company. And I said, well, it's pretty simple, Mike. Some people feel that others should support them and follow them because of their position. And he said, well, isn't that the way it works? I said, oh, no, sir. I want my staff to follow me out of relationship. I want them to think, boy, I've been working with Pastor Johnny. And by the way, my senior associate been with me 27 years, ministry of music 21 years, my children's director 26 years, my preschool's 27. So there's longevity in our team at Woodstock, which has been one of the strengths of the ministry, of being able to build a good team and encourage them. I meet with them, Lord willing, this Friday morning for 2 hours to just speak into their life and hear their concerns and say stuff like this. Hey, you still really fulfilled in what you're doing? Do you feel like you're on mission? What areas are you struggling with? And is there anything in my life you see that if I engaged with you, I could help you succeed? And so he wrote it down. He called me later that afternoon. He said, I've already had a call. And he said, I didn't quote you, but I said what you said. I owned it. And I said, good, because I borrowed it somewhere, I'm sure. But I do a lead out of relationship. I don't ever go in there and say, hey, check it out. Whose name's on the doors, Pastor? Yeah. Who hired you? And by the way, I didn't hire them. If they did, I got a bunch of hirelings. They were called by God, and we had the privilege of serving together. And by the way, they're just serving the chair God placed them in, just like I am. And there are no second chairs. So a true leader's power is the result of a profound trust among his followers. It's shocking that this is true, but a guy can come into my office and say, I've been privileged to serve with you for 12 years, but man, I'm sensing God's calling me to preach. I pray with him, encourage him to follow God's call. Just say, stay faithful at what you're doing here, and we'll work together to see what God opens the door. But you don't get dismissed from my team because God's calling you to do something else. I don't fear losing anybody. They don't belong to me anyway. And matter of fact, we've never lost anybody on our staff. We've launched them. So it makes a difference. Thank you, all one of you. All right, so anyway. So they're convinced, listen to this, and this influence, they're convinced that through them and with them, they can realize self-enriching, God-glorifying results, which would otherwise seem unlikely or impossible. Here's what it looks like. You train somebody to share their faith, and then they come to you and say, oh my God. And here's how it was good for them. Did you know I led my parents to Christ? Pastor, I've been at the church 10 years. Why did no one ever make big on the Great Commission? Hug me, thank you. And really what they're saying is this has been for my good. And so then the next time in a sermon, that's on the video. Hey, I want you to hear from Cindy and the difference Great Commission initiative made in her life. And now she's telling them. And that's cool because she's sitting out there with them. She's one of them. They expect to hear it from me, but they don't expect to hear it from her. So true leaders are followed out of respect and love because they display love and humility and self-control. Every chance you get, you always give the credit to someone else. You're in a church, really. So you're Johnny Hunt. Yeah, so you pastor here at First Woodstock? Yeah, wow. Amazing what you've done here. No, if I could take them in the room with all the people I serve with, they're the ones that get it done. Everybody just tries to pass the credit on to you, and what you got to do is pass it on. So as a leader, it becomes your desire to bring about sameness of purpose. So people feel like a family when they're unified in purpose. Bless you. This is the most important factor in forming a cohesive group, unity and purpose. So a leader desires to move his team to the same page. Now, goals. Let me just mention it. It refers to a leader's vision, his dream of what he sees his team being or doing. I was thinking, and if I have a chance today, I'll share some other stuff that's in the back of my mind. But faith to me is believing. Obedience to me is doing. I was reading an article last night because I do rejoice in the day celebration, Reformation. I was telling some of the brothers that Sunday morning that we took 5 or 6 of the best male singers in our church, put the choir and orchestra behind them, and they sang A Mighty Force Our God, and they weren't not a person in their seat. It was what a celebration. And but one of the things in Martin Luther, and I brought it up, and a guy that was Reformed took me to task. He thought I was being negative on the Reformed theology, but I was just telling Martin Luther struggled with the book of James. He thought it was a contradiction to the book of Romans, and he took it out, tore it out of his Bible, and called it the Epistle of Straw. When he got to heaven, Jesus put it back in. But anyway, that's the half-brother of the Lord, man. He was, tradition has it he was clubbed to death for the gospel, and I love the book of James. I did a 400-page commentary. I may have given it to you last year here, and now I just recently did a discipleship or 12-week Sunday school quarterly on the book of James. It's just, I love the book of James. The book of James, listen to this, in James chapter 1, verse 22, the Bible talks about don't be just hearers, but doers of the word. But when you get to verse 25, he changes words, and he says don't just be hearers, but be doers of the work. And see, sometimes if you're not careful when you talk about works, and the best way to talk about works is it's the fruit of God's activity in your life. So it's not, what we say to Martin Luther, it's not faith and works that James was proclaiming. It's a faith that works. And so, it seems simple, but it's not. But really what you want to do is be a leader that leads your people. Here's a statement, and I'm going to put it in the context of Jerry Falwell. Falwell died at 73. If you don't see it before you see it, you'll never see it. A leader sees, he really does. He sees first, he sees further, he sees broader. It's kind of like the leader, I don't know, it's God indelibly has written in his heart and mind. He kind of can see things to a conclusion. You can kind of begin to see things, and I'm not trying to be weird, but you can see things as how they could be. You can begin to say, if I could get our people committed here, and here. Like I'm in a major stewardship campaign now. I'm really through with the preaching and teaching and the challenging, but it comes to a total conclusion. Not really, but not grand total, but total conclusion on the 12th of November, the reveal. So what I've done, I've cast vision and painted a picture before our people of what our future could look like over the next 10 years. But this is what I think it's going to take to get there. And what you do, you try to sell that. And the reason you're selling it, you need to get buy-in. Because if you don't get buy-in, the people don't own it. Therefore, they don't pay for it. That's why this is another interesting study. It's remarkable the number of preachers that lead their churches in campaigns, and within a year, they're gone. And the reason is the campaign didn't go very well. because the preacher got it, but he never gave the people a chance to get it, and they didn't buy in, therefore they didn't pay for it, therefore he was gone. So it's the commitment to act upon the leader's vision, and that becomes the mission. So in a moment, I want you to really listen carefully, because here's where I'm headed. In a moment, I'm going to tell you some defining words that determine whether you're a leader or not. I'm not going to try to be mean at all, but it may sting a little bit that if these characteristics are not a reality in your life, and it's okay, you may just be a manager. See, a leader has to be careful to build other leaders. If not, he draws a lot of managers because everybody wants to be a part of the leader's vision, but all he does is spends his life assimilating what you grow. And they never really grow anything. So I could speak to that. So his dreams of what he sees his team doing and being, it's the leader's vision that sets him apart and makes him a leader. So I'll just go ahead and give you this one statement now. There's no such thing as a leader without a vision. The very defining of leadership is vision. Give me one illustration. All right, I'll give it to you now, and I'll fill it in the blanks later. Nehemiah. Right now, if you know anything about Nehemiah, you ought to be saying something like this now. God broke his heart, gave him a burden for a wall. And now, in a vision, you can die with a vision in your heart. Unless your vision becomes your mission. That is good. That's good. That is. I mean, it really is. So, I mean, what do I try to do? I try to keep from teaching like a rocket scientist. I mean, it's just not rocket science. God's given me a vision, what could be. These people in this community that are disconnected from God could become connected to God. Jesus paid it all. I just got to get this message to them. Some will buy in, and some that I win will win their friends, and we're going to get this thing moving. Goals also refer to a set of specific, measurable achievements designed to implement the mission. Small wins. I hear it all the time. Pray for me, Pastor. I'm taking a church over in east of Albany. And gosh, they've been in decline for 7 years, and there's only 16 people meeting, and most of them are really getting some age on them. But I just sense God really leading me in here. And then he begins to go in and formulate a vision for that church. And he begins to cast vision. He begins to lead it. You begin to emulate the truth that you're teaching. Roy Fish taught evangelism for 50 years at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. It was a precious friend. We've preached so many times together. He, over, 40 years ago, wrote a book and said evangelism is not taught, it's caught. And now here I am, 41 years a pastor, and I believe every ministry in our church has to be caught. Generosity is caught. And so I write one-liners. Listen to my newest one-liner on giving. You don't have to be rich to be generous. You have to be generous to be generous. That's good. I get a good one every now and then, so make sure you put my initials behind it, all right? No, but I mean, really, it's a thing. Matter of fact, Jesus, when he wanted to give us a story of generosity, chose the poorest woman in the Bible. And then when he wanted to give us a corporate example of generosity, chose the poorest church in the New Testament. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1 through 6, church at Macedonia. The Greek word that's used there is they were at rock bottom destitution. It means that if you dropped the anchor, which consisted of a stone with knots and a rope that told how many meters it went down, that when you measured their ability to give, they were at the bottom of the lake. That's the Greek word that's used there. I went to seminary. All right, permanence. What does it refer to? Permanence. It refers to the fact that the vision of a leader should be for changes that are continuing, enduring, and lasting for time and for eternity. Senior adults, I mean, way up in age, were interviewed if you could do life over. I would reflect more. And by the way, the older you get, the more you reflect. Here's a good definition of reflection. Sitting somewhere quiet, looking out a window with no agenda, and thinking about life. It leads you to talk to yourself, and that's okay. It's a biblical principle. Psalms 103, if you'll study it, bless the Lord, O my soul, it's within me, bless his holy name. It's a reflective prayer. He is actually preaching to himself. He's telling his soul to bless the Lord. And then he lists 5 reasons he ought to bless him. Who's forgiven all my iniquity. He's getting worked up. I ought to bless him. All my sins are gone. He's secured my future. Give me the wings of an eagle like I'm a young man again. So it's just, you do it. They said they would invest more in that which would outlast them. So again, I try to put these little phrases for people. Listen to this one. I want to do now. Now stay with me. I want to do now what I'll be glad I did then. So I'm going to the judgment seat of Christ, the bema. I'm going to be evaluated on listen to this, on what I did with what he gave me. And he's entrusted to me the gospel, which is the same word for deposited, the gospel in me. I'd like to give him a good return on his deposit. So I want to share the gospel. So these are continuing, enduring, lasting for time and eternity. When Nehemiah was leading the Israelites to build the walls, the Bible says that the hands of Judah grew weary. Judah would be God's best. Think about that praise. Judah's was God's best. So he stops for a while and he says, if they start getting, negative and going down, what's going to happen to the rest of these guys that are helping us? So he stops, he pauses, and he goes over there and he begins to give a rally cry. He says, hey guys, I'm going to tell you this isn't just for us. And God is more, it's just what he says, your children and your grandchildren are going to benefit from this. He shows them this is going to go on in. It's like, I would like to invest in something that are true riches. Adrian Rogers defined true riches as anything money can't buy and death can't steal. When you invest in people, you're investing in that which will live forever. So a real true leader will concentrate on goals that are beneficial, not detrimental to the team. It's for our benefit. What we're doing here, this is going to benefit our church, going to benefit our community, going to benefit the nations. So it's leadership that honors God and benefits others. I gave a statement to our church a few years ago. Listen to this. We exist for those who don't belong. Charles Stanley recently said that if God just saved us for heaven, he should have killed us when he saved us. And he said, that stings. Well, sometimes we need to say it in a way that makes you think a little different. But you can read into it, but simply what he meant is God saved us for a purpose. He put his spirit in me. He gave me his message. He endowed me with spiritual equipment and gifts, and he sent me out. Even so, send I you, John 17. And so I'm to go. So when we meet, he's in heaven now. I'm privileged that he's from my home state. I heard him preach on numerous occasions. And he said, we will decide early in our ministry whether we're going to be keepers of the aquarium or fishers of men. Vance Havner. Vance never drove a car and preached in all 50 states. You either send him a bus ticket or a plane ticket. Authored, I don't know how many books. You even have the Vance Havner isms, the great statements in it, are tied with scriptures, a great little read. So it takes sensitivity, a keen awareness to the people for whom God is giving you responsibility. Somebody said, what would you say to a young pastor or preacher that's transitioning, going to a new work? What would you tell them is important in the first year? And it's not deep. And I said, go there and get your finger on the pulse, find out what you got. Be faithful to preach the word and share the gospel with everybody you come in contact with. Invite everybody to come. There's a study I've been teaching for a long time, but I've been saying for years that one of the number one missing ingredients in evangelism, and the reason our denomination has are at a 46-year low in baptisms this year. And the reason is, I said, I really believe this is it. And just recently, Lifeway's research confirmed it, is we no longer invite people to come to church with us. I'm a Christian today because a carpenter would say, John, wish you and Janet would come to church with me Sunday. And the night I went to church, and I want you to listen carefully to this, the night I went to church, get exact, the night I went to church, I got saved. And 8 years from that night, I was the pastor of that church. Because he invited me. Man, when I came back as his pastor, he bought me a suit. He's so proud. He said, I invited John. Yeah. Andrew, when he got saved, what did he do? He uses a Greek word, speaks of priority, and he says, first thing I went and got my brother and said, you got to come meet him. I met him. And then what did Philip do? He went and found his brother. I think his brother was a skeptic. Nathaniel, what did he say? He said, come and meet the one who is the Messiah. To which he said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And he didn't sit there and say, I'm going to use my apologetics. Well, according to the book of Micah. No, he didn't say that. He said, come and see. You ought to come. Remember Drew Todd? Yeah. Remember he'd shake his fist at God and cuss? Yeah. He's sitting on the second row of a week with open Bible and hands raised. God changed his life. That gets people's attention. Drew goes! Yeah, remember Alfred Joyner? Yeah, he's one of the meanest guys at Carolina Beach. You ought to come here and sing the praise. I'd rather hear him pray than anybody at the church. Alfred's over there praying! Yeah, he got saved. Jesus Christ. Come and see. The first year I got converted, they baptized 50 of my friends. Most of them came out of the pool room. See, it was really easy for me because everybody I knew was on their way to hell. Everybody I knew was on their way to hell. That's why you need to train lost people to witness almost immediately because they know all the lost people. So I wrote another statement. Here it is. The longer you're part of his kingdom, the further removed you are from those he died for. I was looking at my schedule this morning. I've got to spend the rest of my week with my people, my staff and all. I mean, my whole week's almost in staff development. And then off training in this place and off training believers in this place. And I get opportunities to share the gospel a lot. I'm just returned from Turkey. The largest population of Iranians is in Turkey. The largest Iranian church in the world is there. I had the privilege to spend a whole day with them. We had 12 Muslim men to come to Christ our day there. So, I mean, God lets us do some neat things. But I spend most of my time with y'all. And it's not all bad, but you know. So I'll just give you this. It's just to tell you how it can still make a difference. You know what I do on Saturday night when I'm home? It just ended, but from April till October, if you come to Woodstock on Saturday night, I'm home. You know where we're going? Dixie Speedway. Yeah, you know, don't you? The church members from Woodstock planted up here, New York. Someone says, why do you go out there every Saturday night? I said, if Jesus was in town, that's where he'd go. Why? That's where all the pagans are. They're out there at the dirt tracks, the fastest growing 3/8 mile dirt track in America. When they bring out the monster trucks, there's 20,000 people, and it's a different crowd. And so what do I do? Well, the owner is a good friend. He got right with God under our ministry, took down his beer signs and put up Bible signs. He did. Going into the third turn, it says, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. It is the coolest thing. I mean, really, you can go there and see this, Dixie Speedway. So we got there. So what do? I go out, and if they line up for the first race, and they turn their engines off. It's now time for the invocation and the national anthem. And so the invocation, here's what they say. They say, and if you'll listen to NASCAR to this, going to ask everyone to please stand in reverence and remove your hats. They don't even do that at church. Pagans, take your hats off, pagans. They don't say it like that, you know. But they just ask them, and they do. I mean, boy, it's because, you know, down in the South, you know, all of them drive large pickup trucks, got a gun in the back, love apple pie, and they all are crazy about their mama. They are. I mean, it's just it. They're great guys. It's just rednecks. But anyway, takes one to know one, all right? So I came in there. But I go there. So you may say, why do you do that, Pastor? Aren't you tied up? I mean, Saturday night, and you're giving up your Saturday night? Because I refuse to no longer be intentional in going where they are and engaging them with the gospel. Hey, here's another thing about the reformers. This is a good thing since this, you know one thing the reformers did? Study them well. They constantly rechecked their motives. I want to make sure that I'm still in it for the reason I went in it. Some of you will know the name, some of you won't. Bob Harrington. Bob Harrington and I were very good friends. I'm good friends with his daughter, Rhonda. Mitzi, I've never met, the sister. When I got converted in 73, he was the chaplain of Bourbon Street, and he was a very popular person. And he got away from the Lord for 20 years. He got right with God in his latter years, and we reconnected. And it's a beautiful story if I take time to share it with you. But God really, really used him as the chaplain on Bourbon Street. But when he first got converted in a small church in the South, Alabama, he would respond every Sunday in the invitation, every Sunday. Here he come. People would be watching. There comes Bob. And so a group of men got together one time and said, you know, Mr. Harrington, we know you're a new believer and all, but we do want to ask you, why do you respond every week? And he said, so I won't become like y'all. Yeah, it stung. Because he had noticed that those that had been in, they may sing the longer I serve him, the sweeter he grows. But sometimes the longer I serve him, the sweeter I ought to grow. Thought I'd get quiet there. So you become attuned to your surroundings. You know, what have I got here? I like to read what's written on church growth, and my big word is church health. Get the church healthy, and you know you can experience some growth. You got a child that's not growing, is not healthy. You look for a doctor. Okay, you don't just sit around and speculate. And so I want to be tuned to my surroundings. So I pastored a church in Wilmington, North Carolina. Not been a new home built in the immediate surroundings in 45 years. I served on Shipyard Boulevard. They built the ships used in World War II, a good number of them, on the Cape Fear River off Shipyard Boulevard. I lived in one of the duplexes that the shipbuilders lived in. So you can imagine, older neighborhood. The North American Mission Board was called a Home Mission Board. Then they sent in a specialist before they called me to be the pastor. And it's the church I was converted in. I went back after seminary to serve the church I was converted in. They recommended the church relocate because it was a non-church growth community. We became the fastest growing church in the state of North Carolina 3 years in a row. It's the first Southern Baptist church in the state of North Carolina to baptize 200 converts in a community where there had not been a new home built in 45 years. Why would you share that with us? Because I get so tired of everybody saying how hard it is to do it here. Hard. And by the way, let me just say this to you. They're saying that everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world. Right now, Montreal, I think it's only about 80 miles from you, not much further than that. Did you know there's some young pastors that God has radically saved, and they've grown churches from 0 to 1,700 in active attendance of all millennials in the last 4 years? Did you know one of their churches is running 4,500? Did you know that's the most lost city on the North American continent? Did you know that 99.5% of that city is unevangelized? I'll spend all next week there pouring into those young guys. You become attuned to your surroundings. I could have gone there and said, you know, I'll tell you what, you can't reach people here. I was with Robbie Zacharias recently. He said, John, I've never seen so much writing on what it's going to take to reach the millennials. And I said, what do you think about that, Robbie? He said, well, one thing, I wish those who aren't reaching them would quit writing about it. You can go to some conference and they tell you what you can't do to reach people anymore. Every time you tell me how you can't reach them, I travel enough, I can tell you a church that's reaching them that way and doing good. And by the way, it's self-fulfilled prophecy. You can talk so much about what you can't do till before long you're paralyzed and you can't do. We need to go against conventional wisdom and realize the gospel is still the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes. You assess the situation. You prepare to take action. So listen. So what if I went in somewhere, I would ask God to make me sensitive. I was privileged to do Henry Blackaby's 80th anniversary celebration in his retirement. But he said, John, I want you to do it, but you may not use the word retirement. And you know, as many of you know now, he's in dementia. And his son Richard and I are really good friends. And I know all those boys. But so we're there. So I was deeply honored to be the keynote for that because his writings had meant so much to me. So I had read the old book, Experiencing God, but they'd done a revision. So I thought, well, if I'm going to speak, I better know all this. So I went and read the other one too. And you know, the one single one-liner that always captured is this: find out what God's up to and join him. It's like, not like you got to go up to New York and start something for Jesus. Find out what Jesus is up to and see if you. So that's going to take sensitivity and a keen awareness and to the people for whom God has given him responsibility. He loves them more than we do, and he died for them. And so we need to get there. So it's you get attuned to your surroundings, you assess the situation, and then you just begin to say, I'm going to prepare to take action. And not everybody will jump on board, but you move with the movers. And so your sensitivity to others is always focused through the vision that God has given you. When Nehemiah went into the city of Jerusalem after being over in Babylon for so long, while everybody was sleeping, he saddled a donkey and rode around the city walls and assessed the situation and wept before God as God birthed this vision and burden in his heart how it could happen. And did you know there's people that have never read the book of Nehemiah, that have read leadership books? Did you know there's actually secular books written about Nehemiah and how you can rally a group of people together to build a wall? And if you've been to Israel, there's a portion of that wall, a significant portion of the wall, to help you realize that houses were built in that wall, that there were double chariots could pass each other on that wall. It's just a memorial to the work of the man of God and what he did in those days. He did something significant, and all we know of him, he was a layman. And by the way, it could have cost him his life to even pursue that until you're willing to die for what you're willing to live for. We're afraid that somebody's going to speak bad of our reputation. I didn't say character, because character is who God knows you to be. Reputation is who people think we are. So he seeks to move the team toward the goals that will fulfill the team's real needs. And by the way, when Nehemiah went in to build those walls around there, it weren't for him. He could have stayed over in Babylon. He had a good job, good paying job, working for the king. But he knew that if the walls were broken down, they were approaching. But just for the record's sake, I know you've studied the history of the Bible some, but did you know that most of the people when he got there did not live within the confines of the city walls? They lived outside. It was too dangerous to live inside the walls. So as they built the walls back, the people moved back into their home places. So the leader will need foresight and wisdom and determination and knowledge of God's will. I'm going to do this or die trying. So a leader acts rather than reacts and uses the past only to give him insight into the present and direction for planning for the future. I have failed so many times. One thing that I do every now and then is just read some books on how many times. It is amazing how many times Thomas Edison attempted to create light and failed, but he thought, hallelujah, that's a way that won't work. Mark that one off and move on. So I have multiple campuses. I never intended to have multiple campuses, but Southern Baptists lose 17 churches a week. 900 a year go out of business. So we celebrated SBC, and I think we should, that we started more churches last year than any year in the history of our denomination. but it was still 400 short of the number we lost. So until we stop death rate, we really can't celebrate the birth rate like we ought to. So a church says, I'm going out of business. Will you take us? Take you. So I took it to our church, and it began to swell up in my heart. I think we can do this. I'm not slowing down the older I get. The Bible says in Proverbs 19:20 that if you listen to advice and receive counsel, you'll be wiser in your latter years. When I was 50 years old, Adrian Rogers said, you're old enough now to probably start pastoring, although you've been doing it since you were 23. So as a leader, you can make a difference, but you will have to face up to the obstacles and challenges and seize the opportunity and pay the price. Nehemiah going into Artaxerxes' presence with a sad face could have meant instant death. Instead, he must have really liked him. He said, man, you're so sad today. He probably thought, oh my God. And he said, so tell me what's bothering you. And then he asked him, what do you need? And by the way, a leader always knows. He didn't say, let me get back with you. By the way, if somebody meets with me this afternoon in Woodstock, it ain't going to happen, I'm not there. But if they were, and they were to say, well, I know you're in this major campaign and all, and one did recently say, what would you like to see Ann and I do? I thought, in the back of my mind, I thought you would never ask. I said, I want you to do this, and I want you to do that. And just so make you feel better, he didn't do either one of them. I think some people think, here's a leader, man, all he had to do was just ask. Well, I did. But I didn't get it. And I'm all right. God still owns it all. He's just, people, I tell you one thing I've learned, you don't have to pray for God to send it down. He already has. We need to pray to get it out of their accounts. Okay, so as a leader, you can make a difference, but you have to face your obstacles and challenges and seize the opportunity and pay the price. And so, you really just can't sit back and say, I could do it here if. That's why so many marriages are ending in divorce. If she wasn't like this. You ever thought God can change you where this don't bother you? Or is the only time God shows his power is when he changes that? I was preaching a little bit on marriage Sunday, and I told our people, it took the attention of the sermon off the people and put it on me, and they liked that better. And I said, could you imagine how hard it is for Janet to have been married to me November the 21st of this year, it'll be 47 years. You imagine, I said, man, I eat fast. She's been trying to get me to slow down eating for 47 years. And I have not moved. I'm not budged. I still eat fast. I talk fast. Some people come to me and say, you're talking so fast. Which, you people in the North, y'all are used to this. The Southerners, how y'all doing? I mean, it's just, and I just speak. I speak so fast. And sometimes my words collide, and I make up new words. My wife said, did you know what you said? I said, yes. She said, why didn't you correct yourself? I said, because half of them didn't catch it. If you correct yourself, they all get it, Now, I've said some I've had to correct because they were bad words. I didn't mean it, though. They could tell I didn't mean it. All right, so Clyde. I walk fast. My wife told me that the reason I have a growing bald spot back here is where her eyes have looked at the back of my head for 47 years. Yeah, that's why you're totally bald. But anyway, so she gave me a fit. But the people like that, hearing it about me, but they could see me in them. By the way, when you're giving illustrations, you don't have to go to a book of illustrations. Live life and speak of your own failures, and your people identify with you and realize there's some hope for them. Everyone who teaches preaching here, that's something I'm sure you work in somewhere. All right, so let me give you a couple more. We'll take our first break because you've been kind, and there's a reason class is 50 minutes long, and I'm pressing the hour. All right, those who lead effectively have, and here's just some things you have to have. If I'm going to lead effectively, I've got to have a generous endowment of physical and emotional energy. Hey, there's five things I really always pray for in my life. God, help me to be the man I ought to be spiritually. I really want to be spiritually right with God. And so that takes your time with the Lord. Intimacy with God. Here's a great way to think of intimacy with God. When you're with God, intimacy. And then show me what you see and give me, have mercy on me and grace to I've had more trouble with me than any church member I've ever led. And if you can keep your attention on your own spiritual health, you can help a lot of people. All right, so that. And I want to be right emotionally, because all of this kind of fits together in the soul. I want to be right mentally. I want to be right physically. That's why I walk. Did you know this? Did you know exercise battles depression? Facts, absolute, medically factual. So, you're having a really bad day, go for a long walk. Break. But you don't feel like going through it, so that's where discipline comes in. You push through, and God gives you the breakthrough. It's the person that comes to church says, I didn't feel like coming to church today, but I thank God that I did. God met them right at the point of need. They found out that he knew where they were. How encouraging that was. And I want to be right relationally. As much as possible, Romans 12:18. Live at peace with all men, as much as possible. He knows that some is just almost next to impossible. So I've got a generous endowment of physical and emotional energy, a compelling drive toward a specific purpose or goal. And every now and then somebody says, and I'm going to talk to you later after lunch about this one subject called passion. Everybody has personality. Everybody don't have passion. People say to me every now and then, you're kind of really fired up. It's just not my demeanor. I'm just not like that. And then I go with them to a Georgia game. Their face is painted black and red. And they're screaming. They can't even whisper in church the next day. No, everybody's passionate about something. Yeah. Every now and then when my wife is walking slow through the corridor at the airport, I say, honey, we're running late. Use your NASCAR legs. Now you get that when there's a NASCAR race and come on, we got to get to our seat. They're getting ready to drop the flag. I can't keep up with her, so we've learned each other. So I have a compelling drive toward a specific goal or purpose, and I want to get it right. I want God to be glorified, but I've always found that when God is glorified, it seems to always rebound to the good of others. It's a mastery of methods of achieving the aim they profess. I got medical doctors, my friends, plumbers that my friends, they really have got a guy at my house today, helping with waterproofing. They've mastered a certain area, and I'm in an area, there's nothing else I want to do. See, here I'm up 65, I'm not living in regrets. I wish I'd have done this for my life or that. No. What was it, one of the Wesley brothers said, if I had 1,000 lives, I'd want to give every one of them to Jesus. I love what I'm doing. I can't believe I get to do this. So I want to master the methods. I want to be the best I can be in my field. I can talk to you about church and staff and Christ and life all day. It's not a labor. People pick me up and say, hey, if you're not tired, I'd like to ask you a series of questions. Seminary students in different places, delighted to. It's Christ is not a way of life. He is my life. All right, number 4, they're capable of sustaining the confidence, loyalty, and frequently the affection of those whom they lead. Hey, this sounds weird. One thing that deeply encourages me as pastor at First Woodstock? The 5 people on the pulpit committee, 3 of them are still my best friends, and 2 of them's in heaven. 2 of them's in heaven. And one of them, before we went to heaven, I did something publicly I've never done in my life. I feel like God impressed me to wash his feet. And we had been trying to lead his son-in-law to the Lord, and he wouldn't listen to us. But his son-in-law came that night because he knew I was honoring his father-in-law. And when I listened to this, and after I washed his son's feet, I gave the gospel invitation, and his son-in-law came to Christ. And amazing, God used that act of service to that man to do that. Jim was a great guy. All right, here's the last one. They are persuasive in enlisting followers, because you can't lead people you don't influence. So you become very persuasive in their life in enlisting followers to support the cause that demonstratively lead to the follower's own best interest, not yours. So if it ever comes across that, he's just trying to do this for himself. He's trying to build a name for himself. And they may say that when it's not true, but they may say it and it is true. A guy says to me one day, hey, pray for me, man. I tell you, our church, I think we could get to 1,000, wouldn't have all the squabbles. I really want to build a mega church. Well, I never desired to build a mega church. Never had a passion to pastor one. You may not believe that. All you're doing is listening to a man talk. So our church grew large. Had a medical doctor come to see me not long ago, and he said, I think you and I have a lot in common. Matter of fact, he just had major surgery yesterday, and we've been communicating with each other. He's not a member of our church. His name's Bill Early. Bill Early was just recognized by the medical profession, doing more to help the county we live in, Cherokee County, than any medical doctor in the last 25 years. So he came to see me, and he said, you know, what you've been serving here has grown large, and I'm just curious, does anybody ever say to you, hey, what all did you do to help the church get so large? I said, yeah, on a regular basis. He said, they do the same thing about medical profession. He said, but John, can I be honest with you? I just try to take care of each patient God sends through the door. And I said, well, that's kind of what we did. If we really became a good home to that mom and dad and their student or their child, they'd go tell somebody else. Latest ministry that we've started, and it's the fastest growing ministry at Woodstock, is ministry to special needs kids. 90% of families in the United States with a special needs child are unchurched. They're an unreached people group, 90%. So we do the ministry. Somebody was talking to me last night, wanting to be involved in it. Oh, a Romanian lady in Atlanta before I left. We do the Night to Shine with Tim Tebow Foundation. And these families flock in. And they're a tribe. So if you minister to one, they come. So we grew from 15 in the last 12 months to an average of 97. That's fastest growing part. I mean, do your percentage on that. That's fastest growing ministry we got. And then special needs, they don't even like to be called special needs. When I was coming along as a child, they called them mental retardation. You don't do that anymore. They don't even want to be called a special needs department. You know what their department's called? Thrive. You know what they do? They do what they do in the public school system now. We have a buddy system at our church. So the special needs kids are in our regular worship service instead of their own worship service. Why? Because they want to be with everybody else. They don't feel they're weird and they wonder why we think they're weird. And so with their buddies with them. So I've got a granddaughter, 16 years old, with cerebral palsy. She went to student camp at Woodstock. How did she do that? And she had a buddy. So and guess what? It's actually the body of Christ serving others. Isn't that a strange equation? Yeah, that's what they did. All right, well, Mr. President, come tell us what to do before we do something again. And when we're going to give them a gift, when do you think we ought to give them a gift?
Whenever you want.
Whenever we do. All right, here's what I did. I tried to bring something. I have others that help me, all right? And so we're grateful to be able to do it. But I wrote a book on leadership, and here was the premise of writing it. Pastor Johnny, take what you believe are these one-liners in your life and develop them. Like I wrote on an insecure leader. I did it before Beth Moore. So anyway, she would love me saying that. But just a brief thing about what an insecure leader is. A lot of leaders can't lead because they're so insecure, and it tells you how to be secure in Christ. And just one-liners, the marriage, or the role it's played with husband and wife and us being effective in leading our church. God didn't just call me, he called us. She releases me with joy, travels with me a great deal. So anyway, I wrote that book. So it's a gift to you. I wrote a book for men. I've been doing men's conference 25 years. Last year, Lifeway, they've been doing it several years. We simulcast it around the world. 31,000 join us on simulcast. 7,000 join us in the room. So it's remarkable. So I've been teaching men. Men are the untapped reservoir of useful energy for the kingdom. So there's never going to be a church built upon which the sun never sets unless the men get right and start underwriting the kingdom work. So anyway, wrote a book and called it Demolishing Strongholds. The second day it hit the market, it became the #1 book in America for men. So I've got another book coming out with a workbook soon. You can check it out on Amazon. So I brought a copy of that. It's the newest book I wrote. And then I sermonize. I wrote 80 sermons on the book of Acts. And so every verse in the book is outlined, exegetical study, and it's just exhaustive outline. So we say, that's what we call them. The professors here say, you call this exhaustive? All right, so, but that's there. But it's free, so, my mom always taught me that never grumble if it's free. So there's 3. There's 3, and your tribe increased. The numbers doubled. So I had to lug this big suitcase, 67 pounds, up here. And but since I am so disciplined, I was able to do it. All right. So anyway, they're there. So pick up those 3 for you. Okay, Mr. President.
Wasn't that good? Yeah.